You don't touch that scalpel. Nurse, you enter this OR when I tell you to, and you speak only when spoken to. You are just a nurse. You change bedpans. I save lives. Know your place. Those were the last words. Doctor! Gregory Preston shouted at Evelyn Cross before the doors of the emergency room were blown off their hinges. He thought he was the god of the operating room. He thought she was a nobody. But when a ghost from the past arrived, bleeding out on a gurney, flanked by 6 armed Navy SEALs who didn't salute the doctor, but saluted the nurse, everything changed. The woman scrubbing the floor wasn't just staff. She was the weapon they had been looking for. The fluorescent lights of Providence Heights Medical Center in Chicago hummed with a sound that only Evelyn Cross seemed to hear. It was a low, electric buzz, not unlike the sound of a drone hovering at 20,000 feet, waiting for a target. But here, in the pristine, sterile hallways of one of the country's most expensive private hospitals, there were no drones. There were only egos. Evelyn adjusted her scrubs. They were generic blue, slightly too large, hiding a frame that was wiry and hardened by years of activity that didn't involve charting fluids or dispensing Tylenol. At 42, she was the oldest hire in the trauma unit's recent intake. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, fraying bun, showing streaks of premature grey. She walked with a slight limp, a skiing accident. She had told HR during her interview. She was currently scrubbing down trauma bay, 3 wiping blood spatter from the floor with the methodical, rhythmic motion of a machine. Cross, you missed a spot. The voice was sharp, nasal, and dripping with disdain. Evelyn didn't look up immediately. She finished her stroke, then slowly rose to face Jessica Miller. Jessica was 24, fresh out of nursing school, and wore her stethoscope like a piece of jewelry. She was also the favorite of Dr. Gregory Preston, the chief of trauma surgery, which made her the de facto queen of the floor. It's clean, Jessica, Evelyn said, her voice raspy. Low. The floor is sterile. It's clean when I say it's clean, Jessica snapped, checking her reflection in the glass of the supply cabinet. Doctor, Preston is due for rounds in 10 minutes. If he sees a single drop of B negative on this linoleum, it's my head. And since I'm the head trauma nurse, it's your job. Evelyn looked at the spot Jessica was pointing to. It was a scuff mark from a shoe, not blood. But Evelyn had learned long ago that in civilian life, battles were fought with pettiness, not ballistics. It was better to lose the small ones to win the war of anonymity. Understood, Evelyn said. She bent down and scrubbed the clean floor again. Jessica scoffed, turning on her heel. Honestly, I don't know why HR hires burnouts. You move like you're underwater. Evelyn watched her leave. If Jessica only knew. Evelyn wasn't moving slow. She was moving deliberately. Every glance she took of the room wasn't just looking. It was scanning. Exit points, potential weapons, the structural integrity of the glass. It was a habit she couldn't break, a ghost of a reflex from a life that officially no longer existed. 10 minutes later, the double doors swung open with a dramatic flair that only one man practiced. Dr. Gregory Preston entered. He was handsome in a magazine cover sort of way, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, hair perfectly coiffed despite a 12-hour shift. He was the hospital's golden boy, a surgeon whose hands were insured for $10 million and whose arrogance was priceless. Status on the pile-up on I-90, Preston barked, not looking at anyone, expecting the air to answer him. 3 incoming. Doctor, Jessica chirped, handing him an iPad. 2 stable, 1 critical, Abdominal perforation. Preston swiped through the chart, his brow furrowing. He stopped in front of Evelyn, who was now restocking the crash cart. He didn't look at her face. He looked at her hands. She was holding a vial of epinephrine. "You," Preston said. Evelyn paused. "Yes. Doctor. You're the new transfer. The one from... Where was it? Some geriatric clinic in Ohio Urgent Care in Idaho." "Sir," Evelyn corrected softly. "Right. Idaho. Potatoes and broken hips." Preston sneered, looking around for a laugh from the residents. They chuckled obediently. "Listen to me carefully. This is a Level 1 trauma center. We deal with gunshots, industrial accidents, and carnage. If you feel faint, if your hands shake, or if you get confused by the big city lights, you leave the room. I don't have time to babysit just a nurse. Do I make myself clear?" Evelyn met his eyes. Her gaze was different from the other staff. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. Her irises were a pale, icy blue that seemed to look through him rather than at him. For a split second, Preston felt a chill, a primal warning signal in his brain that he quickly dismissed as annoyance. Crystal clear. "Doctor," she said. "Good. Now get out of my way. I need a coffee before the carnage starts." As Preston brushed past her, his shoulder checked hers hard. It was intentional, a power move. Evelyn didn't budge. In fact, she was so planted that Preston actually stumbled slightly, his balance thrown off by hitting something that felt less like a middle-aged woman and more like a concrete pillar. He spun around, confused. "Watch it, floor's slippery." "Doctor," Evelyn said flatly. "I'll scrub it again." Preston glared, straightening his white coat, his ego bruised. "Do that." He stormed off. Evelyn went back to the crash cart. She checked the expiration date on the epinephrine. It was fine. But as she placed it back, her hand lingered on her own wrist, tracing the jagged white scar that ran up her forearm, a souvenir from a botched extraction in a place that wasn't on any map. Just a nurse, she thought. God, I hope that's all I have to be today. But the universe, as Evelyn knew better than anyone, had a wicked sense of humor. The shift was grinding on in typical chaotic fashion. A drunk driver with a broken nose, a construction worker with a nail through his hand, and a teenager with an overdose. Routine, boring, safe. Evelyn was in the break room, nursing a cup of lukewarm black tea, staring at the muted TV mounted in the corner. The news was playing a loop of international tensions acoup in a small Eastern European nation. Rumors of a missing diplomat, the usual geopolitical chess game. Suddenly, the hospital's PA system crackled. It wasn't the usual calm voice of the dispatcher. It was the frantic, breathless voice of the ER intake coordinator. Code Black, Trauma Bay 1. This is not a drill. Security to the bay immediately. Code Black. Code Black usually meant a bomb threat or a massive influx of casualties, but the tone was wrong. It sounded terrified. Evelyn stood up, dumping her tea in the sink. She didn't run, she moved with a fast, gliding efficiency, hugging the wall as she exited the break room. When she reached the ER floor, the atmosphere had shifted from chaotic to frozen. Standing at the ambulance bay doors were not paramedics. Two massive black SUVs had screeched to a halt right on the ambulance ramp, blocking the entrance. The doors were open. 4 men in tactical gear, unmarked, wearing balaclavas and holding short-barreled carbines, were setting up a perimeter. They were screaming at the hospital security guard, a 60-year-old retired cop named Jerry, to get back. Back, everyone, back. No one enters. No one leaves. one of the gunmen shouted. His accent was American, but his cadence was military. In the center of the chaos, a stretcher was being unloaded from the back of the first SUV. On it lay a man convulsing violently. He was covered in blood, his clothes shredded. "Doctor!" Preston was standing near the nurse's station, looking pale. He was used to gang-bangers and car crashes, but heavily armed paramilitary units shutting down his ER was not in the brochure. "Who is in charge here?" one of the tactical operators roared, dragging the stretcher into the lobby. Preston stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly but trying to maintain authority. "I am. Doctor. Preston. Chief of Trauma. You can't just bring weapons into a—" "Shut up!" The operator barked. He ripped his balaclava off. He was young, terrified, sweat pouring down a face smeared with grease paint. "We have a VIP, multiple GSWs, gunshot wounds, thoracic and abdominal. He's losing blood fast. We need an OR now. If he dies, everyone in this building is dead. Do you understand?" Preston looked at the patient. The man on the stretcher was older, perhaps 50s, wearing a torn tuxedo. He was gasping for air, pink froth bubbling at his lips. He needs to be triaged." Preston stammered. "We have protocols." "Protocol is dead," the soldier screamed. He racked the slide of his rifle. "Move!" The ER erupted into panic. Nurses screamed. Patients scrambled under chairs. Evelyn watched from the shadows of the linen closet doorway. She wasn't looking at the guns. She was looking at the way the soldiers held them, finger discipline, overlapping sectors of fire. These weren't thugs. They were private contractors, mercenaries, or perhaps high-level government assets operating off the books. And she looked at the patient, the man on the stretcher, even through the blood and the swelling. She recognized the tattoo on his wrist as his arm flopped over the side of the gurney. It was a small, faded, jagged lightning bolt inside a circle. Evelyn's blood ran cold. It was the circuit. That wasn't just a VIP. That was Alexander Volkov, a defector Evelyn had personally escorted out of a Serbian safe house 6 years ago. He possessed the kind of intelligence that toppled governments. If he was here, in Chicago, bleeding out, it meant a containment breach of catastrophic proportions. Preston was paralyzed. He was staring at the gun, not the patient. "He's tensioning!" Jessica screamed from beside the gurney. "His trachea is deviated!" The soldier grabbed Preston by the lapels of his white coat. "Fix him, or I swear to God!" Preston's hands were shaking. He reached for a stethoscope, but dropped it. The pressure was crushing him. This wasn't surgery. This was a hostage situation. Suddenly, a calm, low voice cut through the screaming. "He doesn't need a stethoscope. Doctor, he needs a needle decompression. Left side. Second intercostal space." The soldier spun around, rifle raised. "Doctor." Preston looked up. Evelyn stepped out of the shadows. She held her hands up, palms open, but her posture wasn't submissive. It was balanced. "Ready?" "Who the hell are you?" the soldier shouted. "I'm the nurse who's going to save your principal before his lung collapses and kills him," Evelyn said. She walked forward, ignoring the rifle barrel pointed at her chest. She looked straight at Preston. "Doctor, give me the 14-gauge angiocath. Now." "Cross, get back." Preston hissed. "You're going to get us killed." "He has about 30 seconds before cardiac arrest," Evelyn stated. Her eyes locked on the soldier. "You know it. I know it. Let me work." The soldier looked at Preston, who was useless, then at Evelyn, who looked like she was carved out of granite. "Do it," the soldier growled. Evelyn didn't wait for Preston. She snatched the needle from the crash cart. She ripped the expensive tuxedo shirt open, exposing the bruised, battered chest. She didn't hesitate. She didn't measure with her fingers. She just struck. Hiss. A rush of trapped air escaped the patient's chest. The man on the stretcher took a massive, jagged gasp of air. His vitals on the portable monitor jumped from critical to sustainable. The ER went silent. Evelyn taped the needle in place and looked up at the soldier. "He's stable for transport to the OR, but you have a problem." "What?" the soldier asked, lowering his weapon slightly. "The entry wound." Evelyn pointed to a small, puckered hole near the patient's liver. "That's not a 5.56 round, and it's not a 9mm. There's no exit wound." She looked the soldier dead in the eye. "It's a hollow point, possibly fragmenting, and it's laced. Look at the discoloration around the rim. Blue-gray." The soldier's eyes widened. "Neurotoxin." "If you're lucky," Evelyn said. "If you're unlucky, it's an anticoagulant agent designed to make surgery impossible. You cut him open. He bleeds out in 10 seconds. Preston stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Nurse Cross, you are speaking out of turn. There is no such thing as laced bullets in civilian trauma." "This isn't civilian trauma, Doctor," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave. "And if you open him up without the antidote on standby, you will kill him." The soldier stared at her. He really looked at her for the first time. He saw the scar on her wrist. He saw the way she stood. "Who are you?" he whispered, before Evelyn could answer. The glass doors of the main entrance shattered inward. A canister rolled across the floor, spewing thick white smoke. "Contact front!" the soldier screamed. Chaos erupted again. But this time, Evelyn didn't freeze. As Preston cowered behind the nurse's station, Evelyn Cross moved. She didn't move like a nurse. She vaulted over the gurney, grabbed the soldier by his vest, and dragged him and the patient down behind the concrete pillar of the reception desk, just as automatic fire raked the room, shredding the spot where they had just been standing. The reception desk of the ER was a sturdy semicircle of granite and reinforced composite, designed to look welcoming but built to stop a disgruntled patient from jumping over. Now, it was the only thing stopping 7.62mm rounds from shredding the small group huddled behind it. The air was thick with drywall dust and the acrid, metallic smell of cordite. The soldier Evelyn had dragged to safety. His name tape read, Hayes was reloading his carbine with shaking hands. He had taken a round to the shoulder plate of his vest. It hadn't penetrated, but the impact had likely cracked a rib. He was wheezing. Beside him, Doctor. Gregory Preston was curled into a fetal ball, his hands over his ears. Sobbing. Jessica Miller, the head nurse, was hyperventilating under a desk, her pristine scrubs stained with coffee and dust. Their flanking left, Hayes shouted into his radio, but all he got back was static. "Comms are jammed. We're cut off." He looked at Evelyn. She wasn't cowering. She was kneeling beside the unconscious Volkov, checking his pupillary response with a penlight she had pulled from her pocket. "Who are these guys?" Hayes demanded, firing 3 suppressed shots over the desk blindly to keep the attackers' heads down. "Syndicate cleanup crew," Evelyn said calmly, as if discussing a dosage calculation. "Standard formation, 2 heavy gunners suppressing, 2 breach teams moving up the sides. They want Volkov dead before he can talk to the CIA." Hayes stared at her. "How do you know that? Because that's how I would do it." Evelyn replied, She looked at the ceiling. They cut the power to the elevators. We can't go up to the main ORS. Then we're dead. Hayes spat. We can't hold this lobby. I have 2 men down near the entrance. It's just me and you people. We're not dead, Evelyn said. She grabbed Preston by the collar of his expensive starch-white coat and hauled him up. He was dead weight. Get up, Doctor, she barked. The command had so much force that Preston's eyes snapped open. I can't. I'm a surgeon, not a soldier, Preston stammered. Right now. You're a pack mule, Evelyn said. Grab the feet of the stretcher. Hayes, you take point. I've got the head. We're moving to the old wing. The old wing, Jessica squeaked from under the desk. That's been closed for renovation for 6 months. There's no power there. There's a backup generator for the sub-basement incinerator, Evelyn said. And the walls are lead-lined for the old X-ray units. It's a bunker. Move. Bullets chewed up the top of the granite desk, sending stone chips flying. Now Evelyn screamed. They moved. It was a clumsy, terrified scramble. Hayes provided cover fire, walking backward, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. Evelyn pushed the heavy gurney with a strength that defied her frame, steering it with one hand while dragging a petrified Preston with the other. They burst through the double doors leading to the rear corridor, just as the lobby was overrun. They could hear the heavy boots of the hit squad crunching on the glass behind them. They're right behind us, Hayes yelled. Take the second left, Evelyn directed. Maintenance corridor. They sprinted or stumbled, in Preston's case down the hallway. The hospital sounds were gone, replaced by the ominous silence of the abandoned wing. Plastic sheeting hung from the ceilings like ghosts. Here. Evelyn kicked open a door marked Radiology, authorized personnel only. They shoved the gurney inside. Hayes slammed the door and wedged a heavy filing cabinet against it. He slid down the wall, clutching his chest. That door won't hold them for 5 minutes, Hayes gasped. It doesn't have to, Evelyn said. She was already stripping the remaining shreds of Volkov's tuxedo off. It just has to hold them until we stabilize him. Preston, get over here. The room was dim, lit only by the emergency red lights. It cast a hellish glow on Volkov's grey face. He's crashing again, Evelyn said, her fingers on his carotid. The lung is holding, but the internal bleeding is increasing. That bullet nicked the hepatic artery. He needs a clamp. Now! Preston looked at his hands. They were trembling so violently he couldn't even hold his own glasses. I can't operate here. It's dark. It's dirty. I don't have my instruments. Use the trauma kit from the crash cart we brought, Evelyn ordered. She ripped open a sterile pack. Scalpel. She held it out to him. Preston stared at the blade. No, I can't. If I cut him and he dies, my license, my career. If you don't cut him, he dies in 2 minutes, Evelyn hissed. And then the men outside that door come in here and put a bullet in your brain to leave no witnesses. Is that what you want? Preston shook his head, backing away. The arrogant god of the OR was gone, replaced by a terrified man in a wet lab coat. I can't do it. I resign. I'm done. Hayes groaned, trying to stand up, his weapon raised toward the door. Nurse, I can't help you with the surgery. I have to hold the door. Evelyn looked at Preston, disgust curling her lip. Then she looked at the patient. Fine, she said quietly. She turned to the instrument tray. She didn't hand the scalpel to Preston. She took it herself. Nurse Cross Jessica gasped. You can't, you're not a surgeon. You'll go to prison. Evelyn looked at Jessica. In the red light, The nurse's eyes were terrifyingly void of fear. They were focused, predatory. Monitor his vitals. Jessica, squeeze the bag. Don't talk. Evelyn Cross, the woman who mopped floors and took verbal abuse for minimum wage, stepped up to the table. She held the scalpel with a grip that was entirely different from a surgeon's delicate hold. It was a tactical grip, firm, assured, efficient. She made the incision. It was perfect. A midline laparotomy cut, straight and true, exposing the abdominal cavity. Blood welled up, dark and fast. Suction. Evelyn ordered. When no one moved, she grabbed the manual suction bulb herself, cleared the field, and dove her hand into the open abdomen of the dying man. Preston watched in horror and fascination. She wasn't fumbling. She knew exactly where she was going. Her hand moved past the stomach, lifting the liver with a visceral wet sound. "Got it," she whispered. "Laceration on the hepatic artery. It's a bleeder." Bang! The door to the radiology room shook. A dent appeared in the metal from the outside. "They're breaching," Hayes yelled. He fired 3 rounds through the door. "I need a vascular clamp," Evelyn shouted, not looking up, her hand deep inside the man's body, pinching the artery shut with her fingers. "We don't have one," Jessica cried, rifling through the bag. "We only have hemostats." "Give me a zip tie," Evelyn said. "What a zip tie from the maintenance cart in the corner." Now Jessica scrambled, grabbed a black plastic cable tie, and handed it to Evelyn. "This is insanity," Preston whispered. "You're using hardware store equipment on a human being. Improvised field medicine." "Doctor." Evelyn grunted. She looped the tie around the artery, proximal to the tear, and tightened it. The bleeding slowed, then it stopped. "Hemostasis achieved," she announced. "Pack the wound." Boom! The door hinges blew inward. The filing cabinet flew across the room, knocking Jessica to the ground. Hayes opened fire, dropping the first man through the door, but a second gunman sprayed the room with a submachine gun. Hayes took 2 rounds to the chest plate and went down hard, his rifle clattering away. "Doctor!" Preston screamed and dove behind the X-ray machine. 3 men in black tactical gear stepped into the room. They raised their weapons, scanning the dark space. They saw Hayes down. They saw Preston hiding, and they saw a woman in bloody scrubs standing over the target, her hands deep in his chest. The lead gunman leveled his suppressor at Evelyn's head. "Step away from the target," he said, his voice distorted by a gas mask. Evelyn didn't step away. She looked down at Volkov. He was stable for the moment. She slowly removed her blood-slicked hands from the patient. "Turn around," the gunman ordered. "Knees." Evelyn turned. She held her bloody hands up. She looked at the gunman. "You're sloppy," she said. The gunman paused. "What you breached without a flashbang. You didn't clear your corners, and you're standing in a magnetized zone." Evelyn's eyes flicked to the wall behind the gunman, the massive, ancient MRI machine that had been decommissioned but not disconnected from the backup grid. She kicked the heavy copper switch on the floor console next to her foot. The hum was instant and deafening. A magnetic field of 1.5 Tesla surged through the coil. The gunmen were wearing tactical vests with steel trauma plates. They were holding steel carbines. The laws of physics took over instantly. The weapons were ripped from their hands, flying through the air and slamming into the bore of the MRI machine with a terrifying clang. The lead gunman, standing too close, was jerked off his feet, his vest pulling him backward, pinning him helplessly against the massive magnet. The other 2 gunmen were thrown off balance, their sidearms stripped from their holsters. Evelyn didn't wait. She moved. The limp was gone. The exhaustion was gone. She grabbed a heavy oxygen cylinder from the cart next to her. It was non-magnetic aluminum. She swung it like a baseball bat. The first gunman, scrambling to reach for a backup knife, took the tank directly to the temple. There was a sickening crunch, and he dropped like a stone. The second gunman, the one pinned to the magnet, was struggling to unzip his vest to free himself. Evelyn spun, using the momentum of the tank to drive the bottom edge of it into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping, but the magnet held him fast. She delivered a spinning back kick to his knee, snapping the joint backward. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the hum of the machine. The third man, the leader, had managed to stay out of the magnetic field's primary pull. He had lost his rifle but pulled a ceramic combat knife from his boot. He lunged at her. He was big, fast, and trained. He slashed at her throat. Evelyn dodged, the blade missing her jugular by an inch. She caught his wrist. He was stronger than her, much stronger. He drove her back against the wall, the knife inching toward her eye. "Die, you bitch!" he grunted. Evelyn looked him in the eyes. Her expression wasn't fear. It was boredom. "Popliteal," she whispered. She didn't try to overpower his arm. She dropped her weight, stomping hard on his instep. And as he flinched, she drove her thumb into the soft nerve cluster under his armpit. He roared, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. That was all she needed. She twisted his wrist, using his own momentum to drive the ceramic knife down straight into his femoral artery. He collapsed, blood spurting in a high-pressure arc. Evelyn stepped back, breathing hard but steady. She walked over to the console and killed the power to the MRI. The pinned gunman slumped to the floor, unconscious from the pain of his shattered knee. Silence returned to the room, save for the ragged breathing of Dr. Preston. Preston slowly peeked out from behind the X-ray control booth. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated to the size of saucers. He looked at the three incapacitated men. Special Forces caliber killers neutralized in less than 20 seconds. Then he looked at Evelyn. She was wiping the blood from her hands onto her scrubs. She looked annoyed. "You," Preston whispered. "Who are you?" Evelyn ignored him. She went back to Hayes. The soldier was groaning, trying to sit up. His vest had stopped the rounds, but he was bruised to hell. "Sit rep," Evelyn said, checking his ribs. I think I'm okay." Hayes wheezed, looking at the carnage in the room. He looked at Evelyn with a mix of awe and terror. "Jesus Christ, you're not a nurse." "I am a nurse," Evelyn said, helping him up. "I'm just a nurse who used to work in a different department." Suddenly, a loud, rhythmic thumping shook the dust from the ceiling tiles. The sound of heavy rotors. "Chopper," Hayes said. "Tense. Is it them or us?" The radio on the dead gunman's chest crackled. But then, a different voice cut through the hospital intercom system. It wasn't the panic of the ER staff this time. It was a deep, amplified voice coming from outside the building, booming through the broken windows. "This is United States, Naval Special Warfare Group. The building is surrounded. Lay down your weapons and exit with hands up." Hayes slumped with relief. "Cavalry's here." Moments later, the sound of boots, dozens of them, hammered down the hallway. Not the stealthy creep of the hit squad, but the thunderous advance of a breaching force. Blue, blue, blue voices shouted. The door was kicked fully off its hinges. 6 operators in multicam streamed in, laser sights sweeping the room. They saw the bodies. They saw the blood. Clear right. Clear left the team leader, a massive man with a beard and a patch that read, "Demon Dogs." Stepped forward. He lowered his rifle when he saw Hayes. Hayes' status principle is stable. Hayes coughed, pointing to the table. Just barely. We got hit hard. The team leader looked at the dead mercenaries. He looked at the MRI machine. He looked at the zip tie on the patient's artery. Who secured the room, the leader asked. We're tracking a 6-man hit team. They're down, Hayes said. The leader looked confused. Down, who put them down? Hayes pointed a shaking finger at Evelyn. Evelyn was standing by the sink, calmly washing the blood off her arms with a bar of harsh soap. She didn't turn around. The team leader frowned. He walked over to her. Mom, step away from the sink and put your hands where I can see them. Doctor. Preston stepped forward, sensing a return to order. Officer, thank God you're here. This woman. She's dangerous. She performed an unauthorized surgery. She killed these men with a gas tank. She's clearly unstable. I want her arrested. The team leader ignored Preston. He stepped closer to Evelyn. Mom, I gave you an order. Evelyn turned off the water. She dried her hands with a paper towel. Slowly. She turned around. She looked up at the team leader. The team leader froze. His eyes went wide behind his ballistic glasses. He stopped breathing for a second. He looked at the scar on her wrist. Then he looked at her face. Wait. The leader whispered. Phantom. The other operators in the room went deadly silent. The name seemed to suck the air out of the room. Evelyn sighed. She tossed the paper towel into the bin. Hello. Miller, she said to the giant bearded man. You've put on weight, the team leader. Miller didn't arrest her. He didn't shout. He slung his rifle onto his back. He snapped his heels together. And right there, in the middle of a bloody, destroyed radiology room, the commander of the elite SEAL team snapped a crisp, perfect salute. Mom Miller barked. I didn't know you were in the AO. Command listed you as KIA 5 years ago. I like being dead. Miller, Evelyn said dryly. The hours are better. Doctor, Preston's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the floor. Mum, you're saluting her. She's a nurse. She empties bedpans. Miller slowly turned to face Preston. The look on his face was one of pure murder. This woman, Miller growled, stepping into Preston's personal space, towering over him, was the lead instructor for the Advanced Urban Warfare course at Bragg. She was the first female operative to be embedded with Task Force 141. She has more confirmed kills with a combat knife than I have with a rifle. Miller poked a finger into Preston's chest. She isn't just a nurse. Pal. She's the reason guys like me survive the night. She's Colonel Evelyn Cross, and you will address her as Mom, or I will zip-tie you to that gurney myself. Preston turned the color of ash. He looked at Evelyn. She was leaning against the counter, looking tired. Miller, secure the package, Evelyn said, her voice commanding again. Get Volkov to Walter Reed. He needs a vascular surgeon who isn't a coward. Yes, ma'am, Miller said. What about you? We can extract you. The agency would want to know you're alive. Evelyn looked around the ruined room. She looked at Jessica, who was staring at her like she was a superhero. She looked at Preston, who looked like his world had just crumbled. No, Evelyn said. I have a shift to finish, and I think Doctor. Preston has a floor to mop. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the cold, shaking reality of shock. The radiology department of Providence Heights Medical Center had been transformed into a temporary forward operating base. The hospital was on total lockdown. Local police had been turned away at the perimeter by men in unmarked SUVs who flashed badges that didn't have names. Only clearance codes. Inside, The staff doctors, nurses, orderlies were being corralled into the cafeteria for debriefing, which was a polite word for threats and non-disclosure agreements. Doctor. Gregory Preston sat on a plastic chair in the hallway, wrapped in a shock blanket he didn't need. He was watching the SEALs Miller's team pack up their gear. They moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency. Preston wasn't traumatized by the violence. He was traumatized by the loss of status. For 20 years, he had been the apex predator of this building. Now, he was being ignored by men who treated the janitorial staff with more respect than him. And worst of all, he was watching her. Evelyn Cross was sitting on a gurney, a medic from the SEAL team stitching a laceration on her forehead that she hadn't even noticed. She wasn't trembling. She was drinking a bottle of water and talking quietly with Miller. The doors at the end of the corridor swung open. A man walked in. He didn't wear fatigues. He wore a charcoal grey Italian suit that cost more than Evelyn's yearly salary. He had silver hair, rimless glasses, and the kind of smile that made you check your wallet. This was Deputy Director Charles Kensington of the CIA's Special Activities Division. Miller, Kensington said, his voice smooth as silk. Report. Site secured. Director, Miller said, stepping forward. Hostiles neutralized. 6K IA. No friendly casualties, though Operator Hayes has cracked ribs. The principal, Volkov, is en route to Bethesda via chopper. He's stable. Stable Kensington raised an eyebrow. Last I heard, he had a chaotic liver bleed and a sucking chest wound. How is he stable? Miller smirked and pointed a thumb at Evelyn. Field surgery, sir. Improvised vascular clamp using a zip tie. Saved his life. Kensington turned. He saw Evelyn. His smooth smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a look of genuine, terrified recognition. My God, Kensington whispered. It is you. Evelyn hopped off the gurney. She walked over to Kensington. She didn't offer her hand. Hello, Charles, she said. You're graying, and you're supposed to be dead. Kensington replied, his voice tight. Operation Pale Horse. Yemen. 5 years ago. The report said you were vaporized in the drone strike. The report was written by me. Evelyn said, I'm a good writer. Kensington took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Do you have any idea the mess this creates? A ghost operative resurfacing in a civilian hospital in Chicago. The paperwork alone will kill me. I didn't ask for a reunion. Charles, your asset brought the war to my doorstep. Wait a minute, Doctor. Preston stood up, throwing off his blanket. He couldn't take it anymore. The attention, the reverence for this middle-aged woman, it was infuriating. Director Preston shouted, marching over. I am Doctor Gregory Preston, Chief of Trauma. I demand to know what is going on. This woman, this nurse, violated every protocol in the book. She practiced medicine without a license. She endangered my staff. She destroyed hospital property. I want her arrested immediately. Kensington looked at Preston like one might look at a barking chihuahua. Then he looked at Evelyn. Who is this? Kensington asked. My boss, Evelyn said with a faint smile. He thinks I'm incompetent because I don't flirt with him, Preston spluttered. Incompetent? You're a menace. You're just a nurse. You wash bed ponds. You have no right to touch a patient in my OR. Kensington sighed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, black file folder. It had no title, just a red stripe across the front. Doctor. Preston, is it? Kensington said. Sit down. I will not sit down. Kensington's voice didn't rise, but it hardened into steel. Preston sat. You keep saying, Just a nurse, Kensington said, opening the file. Let me educate you on who just saved your life. He pulled out a photo. It was grainy, black and white. It showed a younger Evelyn in desert camouflage, standing next to a burning tank, holding a sniper rifle that was taller than she was. Subject Evelyn Cross, code name Phantom, recruited out of medical school into the Defense Intelligence Agency, transferred to SAD Special Activities Division. She was the primary field medic for the Tier 1 hunter-killer teams in the Middle East. Kensington flipped a page. In 2014, her team was ambushed in Fallujah. 8 men, all wounded. No extraction. Evelyn held off a company of insurgents for 12 hours while performing surgery on her team commander in a ditch. She kept him alive with a ballpoint pen and a sewing kit while returning fire. She received the Distinguished Service Cross, but it's classified, so she can't wear it. He flipped another page. She speaks 6 languages, including Farsi and Mandarin. She is an expert in urban evasion, tactical driving, and asymmetric warfare. And regarding her medical license, Kensington pulled out a document with a gold seal. She is a board-certified trauma surgeon with a specialization in ballistic injuries. She gave up her license voluntarily when she went deep cover. She is not practicing without a license. Doctor, she wrote the textbook you studied in med school. Chapter 4. Emergency Hemorrhage Control in Hostile Environments. That was her. The silence in the hallway was absolute. Jessica, the head nurse, gasped. I studied that chapter. That was Dr. E. C. Ross Evelyn Cross. E. C. Ross, Evelyn murmured. I wasn't very creative with the pseudonym. Preston stared at the file, then at Evelyn. His face was a mask of humiliation. The woman he had belittled, the woman he had forced to mop floors while he bragged about his golf handicap, was a legend. Why, Preston whispered, if you're that, why are you here? Why are you a nurse? Evelyn looked down at her hands. The hands that had killed men and saved men. Because, Doctor, she said softly, in my old job, for every one person I saved, I had to kill 3. I got tired of the math. I just wanted to help people without the body count. Being a nurse, holding a hand, cleaning a wound, comforting a scared child. That's the only work that ever felt clean. She looked up at him. I didn't want the glory. I just wanted the peace. Something you wouldn't understand. 3 days later, the hospital was back to normal mostly. The broken glass in the lobby had been replaced. The bullet holes in the radiology walls had been plastered over and painted. The staff had signed the NDAs. And the official story was a gang-related shooting incident that was quickly handled by police. Doctor, Preston had called in sick. Rumor was he was taking a sabbatical. Evelyn was back on shift. She was stocking the supply closet in Trauma 4. She moved with the same quiet rhythm, the same unassuming posture. But the atmosphere was different. When she walked down the hall, the other nurses didn't ignore her. They nodded. Some whispered. Jessica Miller, who used to snap orders at her, now brought her coffee without being asked. Fresh pot, Evelyn, Jessica said, placing the cup on the cart. And I did the inventory for you. Thanks. Jess, Evelyn said, not looking up. There's a visitor for you, Jessica added, her voice dropping. In the VIP wing, room 402, security said he specifically asked for the nurse with the scar. Evelyn froze. Room 4. 02 was the secure recovery suite. She walked up to the 4th floor. 2 men in suits, CIA protection detail, were standing outside the door. They saw her coming and stepped aside without a word. She entered the room. Alexander Volkov was sitting up in bed, hooked up to monitors, looking pale but alive. The man whose secrets had almost destroyed the hospital. "You look terrible," Evelyn said, standing at the foot of the bed. Volkov chuckled, wincing as his stitches pulled. "And you look exactly the same. Phantom. Time has not been kind to either of us." "Why did you come here?" Alex Evelyn asked. "You could have gone to any black site, any safe house." Volkov looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. "I didn't come for the hospital. Evelyn, I came for you." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "How did you know I was here?" "I'm a ghost. Ghosts leave footprints if you know where to look," Volkov said. "I saw the medical reports from this hospital. A particular technique used on a car crash victim 3 months ago. A field tourniquet tie. Only one person ties a knot like that." He turned to look at her. "I'm out of the game. Evelyn, I sold the files to the Americans. I'm retiring. But I had one loose end." He reached for the bedside table and picked up a small velvet box. 5 years ago in Yemen, when the drone hit, you didn't just save yourself. You went back into the fire. You pulled my daughter out of the rubble. You thought she died in the transport." Evelyn's breath hitched. That was the nightmare that woke her up at 3 a.m. The little girl, Anya. "She didn't die," Volkov said. Tears welled in the old spy's eyes. "She's in a boarding school in Switzerland. She's 18 now. She plays the cello." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver charm bracelet. "She made this. She told me if I ever found the lady in the dust, I should give it to her. She calls you her angel." Evelyn took the box. Her hands, which hadn't shaken while holding a scalpel inside a dying man, were trembling now. "I thought I lost her," Evelyn whispered. "You saved her," Volkov said. "You're not a killer. Evelyn, you never were. You were always a healer who just happened to be good at fighting." Evelyn closed her hand around the bracelet. The cold metal felt like forgiveness. "Thank you," she said. "Kensington is outside," Volkov noted. "He wants to offer you a job. Command of the new counter-terror medical unit. General's rank. Big pay." Evelyn smiled, a genuine smile. "I know what he wants." The wind on the hospital rooftop was whipping violently, stinging Evelyn's face, but she barely felt it. The roar of the rotors was deafening. A matte black Sikorsky helicopter sat idling on the helipad, its blades cutting through the Chicago smog. It didn't bear the markings of a medical evac unit. It bore no markings at all, just the sleek, predatory silhouette of a military ghost flight. Standing by the open door of the chopper, shouting over the turbine whine, was Deputy Director Kensington. He held a thick dossier in one hand and extended the other toward Evelyn. "The President is waiting at Andrews," Evelyn Kensington yelled, his tie flapping in the wind. "The ink is wet on the executive order. Full reinstatement, rank of general. You'll be director of the new clandestine medical corps. No more hiding. No more scrubbing floors. You can finally come home." Evelyn stood 10 feet away, her arms crossed over her chest. She was still wearing her blue scrubs, now stained with the blood of the men who had tried to kill her patient. In her pocket, she fingered the cold silver of the charm bracelet Volkov had given her. It was the offer of a lifetime. It was vindication. For 5 years, she had lived in the shadows, swallowing her pride while lesser medical professionals belittled her. She had taken orders from arrogant children like Dr. Preston. She had been invisible. Now, the most powerful government on Earth was begging her to return to the light. All she had to do was step onto that helicopter. Behind her, the roof access door banged open. Dr. Gregory Preston stumbled out, looking disheveled. He was carrying a box of his personal effects. Security had escorted him out of his office 10 minutes ago. He had come up here for one last look at his kingdom, only to find the nurse who had destroyed his career standing in front of a black ops extraction team. Preston froze, clutching his box. He watched Kensington gesture to the helicopter. He saw the adoration in the eyes of the deadly Special Forces operators standing guard. "Go on," Preston sneered, his voice barely audible over the wind, though Evelyn heard him. "Go back to your war. Cross. It's where animals like you belong. Leave the healing to the doctors." Evelyn turned slowly to face him. Her eyes were hard, the icy blue of a glacier. "You still don't get it." "Do you, Gregory?" she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "You think medicine is about the white coat? About the title on the door? You think because I know how to take a life, I don't know how to value one. You're a killer." Preston spat. "A weapon? You don't belong in a hospital." Before Evelyn could answer, the radio on Kensington's belt crackled with a priority override. "All units, stand by. We have a code orange. Repeat, code orange. Massive structural collapse at the I-90 overpass. A school bus and 3 commuter vehicles involved. Multiple pediatric traumas inbound. ETA 3 minutes. The ER is overwhelmed. We need all hands. Repeat, all hands." The message hung in the air between them. Kensington looked at his watch, then at Evelyn. "That's tragic." "Evelyn, but it's not your problem. Local EMS will handle it. We have a briefing at the Pentagon in 2 hours. The world needs you for bigger things than a traffic accident." Evelyn looked at the helicopter. It represented power, respect, a life where no one would ever dare tell her to know her place again. Then she looked at the city skyline, where a plume of black smoke was rising from the highway. She thought about the pediatric traumas inbound, scared children, frantic parents, chaos. She looked at Preston. He was pale. He knew the hospital was short-staffed, with him fired, and the other attending surgeons stuck in the debriefing. He knew children were going to die because there wasn't enough experience in the room. "You're right." "Charles," Evelyn said, turning back to the CIA director. "The world does need me." Kensington smiled, relieved. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to board the chopper. "Excellent. Let's go." Evelyn didn't move toward the chopper. She took a step back toward the roof access door. "That's why I'm staying," she said. Kensington's smile vanished. "Excuse me. You have plenty of generals. Charles, you have plenty of killers." But down there she pointed to the ER entrance far below. "Their shorter trauma nurse." "You're turning down a general's star to change bandages," Kensington shouted. Incredulous. To be a nobody, Evelyn reached into her pocket and pulled out her hospital ID badge. It was a cheap piece of plastic that read E. Cross, RN. She clipped it onto her collar. "I'm not a nobody," she said, her voice ringing with a quiet, devastating authority. "I'm the woman who is going to keep those kids alive while you fly back to DC and push papers." She turned to Preston. The arrogant doctor was staring at her, his mouth agape. He couldn't process it. She was rejecting ultimate power to do the grunt work he despised. "Preston," Evelyn said, pausing as she walked past him. "If you ever want to learn how to actually save a life instead of just billing for it, come find me. I might have an opening for a scrub tech." She didn't wait for an answer. She kicked the door open and sprinted down the stairs, taking them two at a time, moving with the speed and grace of the elite warrior she was. Kensington watched the door swing shut. He stood there for a long moment, the wind whipping his suit jacket. He looked at the empty seat in the helicopter, then at the closed door. "Damn," he whispered, a smirk slowly forming on his face. "She really is the best." Down in the emergency room. Chaos reigned. The doors burst open and paramedics rushed in, carrying bloodied children screaming for their mothers. The residents were freezing up. The noise was overwhelming. Panic was setting in. "Who's in charge?" a paramedic screamed. "We need a triage officer." The young residents looked around wildly. Jessica Miller was trying to organize them, but she was overwhelmed. Then, the double doors at the back of the ER swung open. Evelyn Cross walked in. She wasn't winded. She wasn't panicked. She walked with a calm, terrifying focus that seemed to lower the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. She grabbed a pair of gloves from the wall dispenser and snapped them on. The sound was like a gunshot. "Miller, get line 1 on fluids." Evelyn barked, her voice commanding the entire floor. "Hayes, get the intubation kit for bed 3. You resident, stop shaking and put pressure on that femoral artery or get out of my trauma bay." The room snapped into focus. The panic vanished, replaced by purpose. Every eye turned to the middle-aged woman in the stained scrubs. They didn't see just a nurse anymore. They saw a general. Evelyn looked down at the frightened child on the gurney. She brushed the hair out of his eyes and smiled a warm, genuine smile that had nothing to do with war. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you." She looked up at the cardiac monitor. "Flatline. Charging paddles," she shouted. Clear thump. The heart monitor beeped. Once, twice. A steady rhythm returned. Evelyn Cross took a deep breath. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. What a powerful ending. Evelyn proved that true heroism isn't about the medals on your chest or the rank on your shoulder. It's about the choice to serve where you are needed most. She walked away from the CIA and the glory to save children who would never know she was once the world's deadliest soldier. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And I have to ask, if you were Evelyn, would you have taken the general's job or stayed in the ER? Let me know your honest answer in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for our next real-life drama. Thanks for watching.